in Rohnert Park. And the only thing that will challenge her is what? I knew you were on smart. I have a couple of announcements. The first one is every year Jewish organizations, hope saved me again, Jewish organizations, synagogues, and community groups commemorate the Holocaust on a holiday called Yom HaShoah. And we, in fact, in the Jewish community of Sonoma County will observe Yom HaShoah commemoration. And it's going to be on Sunday, May 4th in Santa Rosa. And it's called Door to Door, Passing the Flame of Memory to a New Generation. We'd like to invite all of you to come to the memorial. We'll have flyers. I have some flyers now, and then we'll pass them out in section as well. I know some of you are probably interested in doing that, and it is on a Sunday. The next thing is, before Mathilde gets here, I'd like to perhaps just mention this before she gets here. Several years ago, the students in this class donated money to the orphanage and school that Mathilde is connected with in Rwanda. And we've done it every year. We ask you to be generous. I know I didn't let you know ahead of time, but we ask you to be generous so that we might once again help her build another Sonoma house, because there is a house at the orphanage that is now named after Sonoma, the students and faculty and friends at Sonoma State University. So I'm just going to send this around after she talks, and you can put in whatever you can. Every little bit helps. Remember, this is going to Africa, a place where our money goes a long, long way. So after Mathilde speaks, I'll send it around. While we're waiting for her, we're going to see a short video which features General Dallaire, the general who was in charge of the UN troops in Rwanda when the genocide started. So, Robin, lights.
Rwanda, one of Africa's smallest nations, known as the land of 1,000 hills. For 3 months in 1994, Rwanda experienced genocide. Years have gone by, but the country remains scarred. Here, one man has found his father's body and will finally be able to provide a proper burial. Canadian General Romeo Dallaire witnessed the genocide as commander of a small UN peacekeeping force stationed in Rwanda. In June 2002, he spoke at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum about how the genocide might have been prevented and about his own struggle with the memory of failing to do so.
You can't just say, well, it's 8 years ago or 9 years ago, and you did what you could. Did I do everything I could? Did I have all the tools?
On April 6, 1994, Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana was assassinated when a missile shot down his plane. Extremist leaders of the country's Hutu majority took the assassination as the signal to launch their carefully planned campaign of extermination against leading Hutu moderates and the country's entire Tutsi minority. The extremists seized control of the government. Tutsi of all ages were left without refuge. They were hunted down and killed in their homes, at roadblocks, in schools, in churches. In 100 days, as many as 800,000 people, including 3 out of every 4 Tutsi in Rwanda, were murdered.
You can't imagine the smell, the sound of dogs eating humans throughout the night, howling. I had hundreds of seeing children living amongst the corpses of their families, because there's nowhere else to go and there's no orphanage and nobody could pick them up at the time.
In the middle of this horror were General Dallaire and the poorly equipped UN force sent to keep a peace that the extremists had suddenly, violently shattered.
You have no food, water, fuel, medical supplies, defensive stores, because none of the contracts have been signed 6 months into the mission by the UN staff. Countries have not provided troops with equipment, so you got Bangladeshi troops coming in with not even a pot to be able to cook their food.
3 months before the genocide began, General Dallaire had learned of extremist plans for mass murder and told his UN superiors that he was going to seize an arms cache.
The response was immediate, within hours, that I was not authorized, it was outside my mandate, and that I was jeopardizing the whole mission. Well, on the 6th of April, the war started. Within 24 hours, I had 10 soldiers dead, but already thousands of Rwandans were being slaughtered.
After the killing started, General Dallaire requested more forces to stop the murders.
Within the first few days of the Rwandan war and genocide, Kofi Annan went to all 69 countries, not one of them provided one soldier.
Although no nation would send troops to help the Rwandans, Western soldiers did arrive to evacuate Westerners.
And so all the expatriates, within 5 days, picked up what they had, left the Rwandans who had served them for years, decades, who raised their kids, left them to be slaughtered behind, and went back to Brussels and Paris and all these other places.
The world turned its back on Rwanda. 2 weeks into the genocide, the UN Security Council voted to reduce Dallaire's force to a token level. The killing continued for weeks. 100 days after it began, the genocide ended when a Tutsi-led rebel force, the Rwanda Patriotic Front, drove the genocidal government out of the country. General Dallaire left Rwanda in August 1994. He still struggles with the memory of what he witnessed.
You just can't walk through all that blood and all that gore and all that sound. Did I or should I have walked up to Kofi Annan or Boutros Ghali and throw my commission in front of him and say, to hell with you, nobody's coming, so I'm going? Should I have commenced opening fire? The first morning, it was made very clear to me that if I opened fire, I would become the third belligerent, because then it's open season. But with the force I had, there was no way that I could open fire and guarantee the security of my force. I didn't have enough ammunition to be able to hold out in a firefight for more than half an hour. No, there is no conceivable way of actually being able to walk away from the immensity of what it is. And imagine the moral dilemmas we have of all those people calling that morning, screaming at the end of the phone for me to send troops to get them, and hearing the people smashing down the door and shooting them at the end of the phone, or deciding which ones I could go and rescue and which ones I couldn't go and rescue. Of the moral dilemma of the soldier who's all of a sudden seeing a crowd encouraging a girl of 14, 15 with a machete and a child on her back to kill another girl of 14, 15 with a child on her back. What do my soldiers do? They're held up at the entrance of the village, and they see these hundreds of people edging on this girl, killing on her. Do my soldiers open fire into the crowd, killing God knows how many and injuring, to go save that girl? Does the corporal, who's 19, 20, 21, coming out of our same schools, does that corporal take his sniper and orders him to shoot the girl with a machete, probably killing her child? Does the corporal simply walk away? What's the answer? What is the answer? What will he be held accountable morally? What will he be held accountable technically? If he had to open fire, he went directly against the mandate, and God knows what the reaction was. He didn't open fire. He negotiated and negotiated, and as he's negotiating, this girl was being chopped up and her child was chopped up. And the crowd roared. And then it was finished. That corporal of 21 came back home. And back home, we had nightlife, and we had hockey, and we had everything else. The country's not at war. There's no war. Rwanda didn't affect our security. They went there because there was a belief that there were humans who needed help, and found themselves totally incapable of providing that help. And they come back with this new generation of injury called post-traumatic stress syndrome that in fact affects the brain, because those moral dilemmas not being solved remain. And that's what we live. And that's what the Rwandans live. I sent a section of 2 vehicles to a house where we suspected there were people there that needed to be pulled out. They didn't find them. So they came back, and the next day I said, go check just in case. The next day they went, and the whole family was slaughtered on the floor. They didn't find them because the family wasn't sure whether or not they were UN or simply people dressed up and using the UN, so they hid in the ceiling. The militia saw the troops going to that house, and so they tore the place apart and slaughtered them. Sometimes you were wondering whether going to help them was putting them in danger. This is not 4 or 5 people on a block. This is thousands upon weeks and weeks and weeks. And the Western world sat there. You've got to start wondering about the depth of your belief in the moral values, the ethical values, and your belief in humanity. All humans are human. There are no humans more human than others. That's it.
Lights, please. Tutsis had a nervous breakdown. You know from your reading what an intense experience this was. What is your reaction to the dilemma of a good man in hell? What do you think, after reading and seeing this, we might have done differently? Yeah, Ryan.
Well, he said they only had enough ammunition to hold back for 30 minutes. So maybe just like establish a larger peacekeeping force.
A larger peacekeeping.
Yeah, not necessarily with more ammunition, but just more presence.
How many of you have seen Black Hawk Down? What was that story? What was that about? Tell people who haven't seen it. You remember? What is it the story of? You saw it? Somebody knows. Black Hawk Down. I'm sorry.
It's been years since I've seen the film, but I think the premise of it was U.S. soldiers were coming in to rescue other U.S. soldiers who were somewhat entrapped by just the uproar and the fall of the, I can't remember where they were at, but the fall of the government around there.
Who remembers where they were? Say it.
Mogadishu.
Somalians. Mogadishu. And what happened to the U.S. soldiers?
I believe many of them did die, but most of that was just an attempt just to get them out of there and just get the hell out of there.
What else happened? What else happened that was so shocking and that was shown on television in the States? Yes?
Well, a lot of the captured U.S. bodies like dragged through the streets instead of flying.
American soldiers were dragged through the streets of Mogadishu. Now, I'm trying to remember when that was. Does anybody remember the
It
date?
was just about a few months before Rwanda.
Okay, so that was
90.
14 years ago. So I don't imagine most of you have much of a memory of that imprinted. But you can imagine what kind of impression that left with the notion of sending American troops into Africa to get right in the middle of a dispute between two groups. So what happened, Ryan? Your suggestion was not a feasible one because people didn't want to see any Americans experience that again. It would have been politically what? Suicide. In a attempt to reconcile what he had done, not done, Bill Clinton went to Kigali, he went to Rwanda afterwards and apologized for not doing it. If you were knowing what you know now, if you knew that that was going on, do you think there's what might you have done? Not you, President. That hasn't happened yet, but as just a citizen, what would you have done? What could you have done?
Typically start with emailing elected officials, and they probably get bombarded with emails and that by staff, maybe. Letters, physical letters, probably be a little bit more good. From what I read, telegrams get the most response.
Telegram. Start with email, telegrams, were you still sending them?
No, I don't know, but I had read the things, right, you know, how you get
So you
response to things.
would have responded by saying what to the government? What would you have said to the government? Yes.
I was just wondering, are you talking about before or after? Because the Rwanda thing, that happened so fast. How do you act? How do you get the government to put that on their political agenda so that fast? How do you get your voice heard that fast?
But wasn't there, I mean, the US profited, right, out of this whole thing. I mean, they got their American type-based government, they got rid of the French having banks, whatever, having in Rwanda, and they got it in RPF, which is kind of what they wanted. Everything got switched to English, they had some other protectorate.
Right, so what she's saying is,
Why would they want to stop it?
why would we want to stop it? We got what we wanted, and that was the change of regime that was much more
Conducive
conducive to
to American interests.
American interests. Could be.
I mean, obviously, from a humanitarian point of view, that's not the way to look at it, but.
Right.
Okay.
But, so, it would have been really easy to just say, I can't do anything, this is what the government wants. This is in their best interest. Right? Yeah.
Well, when it comes to dealing with your elected officials, they're looking at getting reelected, and so they can implement their constituents, they basically will pay.
So if they get enough from, if public figures get enough from their constituents, they'll do something. There's a very wise woman who's written a book. You're laughing, Jason.
Yeah.
You're our cynic. Tell us what you think about that.
I don't know how many people want a war in Iraq, and he said, that's great, you have your opinion, and you win anyway.
Say it so we can.
All I can think was when the Iraq war happened, and the general population said no, we demonstrated, and we came out and said, oh, it's great that we live in a country where you can say no, he went ahead and started. We're still there, so you can try a politician, but hold your breath.
And I can respond to
You
that.
most certainly can.
At the time, I think that the polls show that the majority of the country supported a war in Iraq. People were out for blood. In retrospect, nobody wants it. But at the time, it was very different.
That's my response.
Okay. I don't know anyone who did.
Anybody else want to? Yes.
Well, initially, we went into Afghanistan, and it was right after 9/11, so I agree with this young lady regarding the fervor behind the movement of going to war. However, I also agree with this gentleman here, because soon after, when we realized that Bush's agenda was a lot different than what we thought, and he went into Iraq, I think people changed their minds.
76% approximately, the last number I heard, Americans don't want to be in Iraq. Why are we still there?
It's possible.
It's impossible to get Congress.
Congress is trying their best.
There's a very, very smart woman by the name of Samantha Power who said that the reason that the United States does not respond to genocide is because the government is just carrying out the will of the people, and the people haven't made enough of a stake. And that as long as we are silent, the government will do exactly what they think is in their best interest and not in our best interest. And the only way that I can dot the I on my point is to say the word Darfur. Because genocide and has watched it happen without any kind of intervention. Because all of us have not made our will known. And so, how many of you, well, we'll give you an opportunity next week to get going and to be able to have the wherewithal to say, well, it's not something that I approve of and I've done something about it. But unless we act, we can no longer say, as Michael Barron told us last week, we can no longer say, we didn't know anything about it. Right? Okay. A very good friend came into the room. And I know it was stressful. I wanted to introduce, do you have time to sit? Okay. I want to introduce you. Okay. We are most fortunate that the traffic at least allowed Mathilde to get here. It's my honor to introduce Mathilde Mukatabana. She has been a friend of Sonoma State and this lecture series for several years. She has come and talked with students like you for quite a while. And she's originally from Rwanda. She has a BA from the University of Burundi and an MA and M.S.W. from Cal State Sacramento. And she's currently a professor of history at Consumnes River College. She's been involved in the Rwandan experience for more than 20 years. And she's the co-founder of several organizations, including American Friendship Committee for Rwandan Refugees and the Association of Rwandans in Diaspora. She is currently the president of Friends of Rwanda Association, a nonprofit relief organization that helps children orphaned by genocide with focus on rural areas that are not reached by international organizations. She teaches courses in social work at the National University of Rwanda. And under the sponsorship of the United Nations Development Programs, she helped launch the social work program at the university in the summer of 1999. We were most lucky to have two students who were taking the lecture series who went to Rwanda the summer after they heard Mathilde and spent some time with them. She maintains her connections to the Sac State because her husband, Andre Kameni, is a professor in the Ethnic Studies Department. More personally, Mathilde has lost 6 siblings and both her parents during the killings. She was in Canada this weekend, and I already have your remarks. They were published in the paper, and where she said, genocide cannot disappear unless everyone is appalled by it. It is a big problem in our century. First we had the Jewish Holocaust, and then we had the Rwandan genocide, and it is still going on. I mentioned to you about our bowl in the organization FORA, Friends of Rwanda Association, which raises money to help orphan children in Rwanda support themselves. Many children were left in charge of their younger siblings when they were orphaned, and they lacked the money necessary to go to school. FORA has established many educational programs and helps equip young young heads of households with the means to support themselves and their younger siblings. It is my great honor to consider Mathilde a friend and to spend much time. She is also an advisor to us for our Holocaust and Genocide Memorial Museum and serves on the board of the Alliance for the Study of the Holocaust. And I ask you to welcome her. Mathilde. Can you hear? Say something.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Myrna, again. It's really a pleasure always to come here because it's among friends. And for people who have been, who have lost people in genocide or other type of thing, it's always good to have people who support. I don't need to talk about genocide to understand that people understand it. And at some level also the people in the class, because you know more about genocide than more people have seen in my life. You talk about Rwanda, even today no one knows about Rwanda. There are very few people, unless you are connected to something like this, really can tell you anything about the country. And when you talk about lack of knowledge, it can also mean, dying. We died because we really didn't matter that much. People in Rwanda died in hundreds of thousands of people because people didn't care that much to stop what was taking place. And I'm not here to blame the international community. I'm not here to blame anybody because Rwandans failed themselves. It's not just the international community. We are just talking about the UN. We are talking about the United States. We are talking about France. But ultimately, Rwandans killed themselves. They killed each other. And I definitely don't take any responsibility out of them. They are not children. This has been the 14-year commemoration of Rwandan genocide. And for us, as Myrna said, I was in Canada 2 days ago, and for the first time, something changed in the way we were doing commemoration. For me, it changed, and it was very clear. The first thing is that this is for the first time that Rwandans themselves can actually talk about the people who have died in detail and accept to talk about it. Usually, even in our commemoration in Sacramento or other places, it's very difficult to find someone to actually come and talk about the killings or the family that, I say it, but in general, it's very difficult to actually talk about the individual. And yet, I truly believe that before you can talk about ending genocide, you have to put faces to genocide. Otherwise, we are statistics, and statistics don't talk. People don't care about statistics. As a matter of fact, there was a study done not long ago saying that when you lose 10 people, people care, and then when it starts to become 100, people start being really numb. 100,000, yeah, people talk about people dying, but it doesn't prevent you from going home and eating and, celebrating, doing those kind of stuff. And for me, aside from people maybe who are touched directly by genocide, and I know people volunteer, they do things, they have to embrace genocide as something that is against humanity, not just the people in Rwanda, not just the people in Germany, not just the people in Sudan. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. It will continue. It becomes like when you say people in Iraq are dying, and somehow people really don't connect with those people dying. That is like you losing a sister or a brother, someone who used to like to sing or to laugh or to do those kind of stuff. You have to connect to that level before you can become involved. And, I always say that studies like this are the beginning, really. Because wherever you teach, you go to places, even if they learn sociology, they learn political science or history, it doesn't really grab you because you don't read about genocide, you don't see the images. You know, we are afraid, and we have that kind of uneasiness even to show those stuff in my own school. You know, unless people are telling me you have really to come and talk, or during genocide, the commemoration like today. But it has to go beyond April. You know, if it's just April, then it doesn't make any difference either. So, or we want to stop genocide for them. So that's one of the biggest changes I found among my own fellow Rwandans when I was in Canada. It was that for the first time they are talking about it. For the first time, they are refusing to be victims. You know, for the first time. You know, and they are saying we have to fight against the genocide, use the same propaganda against the deniers of genocide, because as we speak, 2 days, about a week ago, people were killed at the museum in Kigali, trying to, you know, grenades were thrown. So Rwanda and the genocide are not over yet. Even when we talk about one individual country, even though we talk also about Sudan or other things. So for survival mechanism, for other things, we have to keep fighting. And not just Rwandans. We might think that this is attacked somewhere in Africa or somewhere, but the people in Africa, they can change the whole global setting. You've heard about Americans who were traveling in Rwanda and who were killed by people who committed genocide. It affects all of us, even on very selfish, selfish. Let's not even talk about humanitarianism or whatever we think about. Genocide affects all of us. And it makes our world unsettled when we still have genocide in our century. I want to talk briefly, I know you've read books about Rwanda, but I talk about the main points that I find that are important to understand what took place in Rwanda. And I look briefly at the history, or the part of it that I believe is relevant. I'm not talking about the whole history of the country. I look briefly at the pre-colonial, colonial, and post-independent period, then 1994 genocide. And this is really a general presentation, then I have a couple of PowerPoints on genocide per se, but I'm looking at the whole history of Rwanda. This is, if you see something like this, it represents the country. It's about unity work and patriotism. So if you find this, is what it represents. Rwanda is in the heart of Africa. We always, when we grew up, we said we were in the heart of Africa. That's where God came back to spend the night. It was so peaceful that people really, so no one could have dreamt that we go there. Rwanda was very small. And the main reason I'm putting this map of Rwanda is to let you know what the historical part had to do with it. As you can see, original Rwanda is very small over there. So you can imagine how the rest of Rwanda came to be. It was by military conquest. Rwanda was a very militaristic country, starting in 11th century and on. It's a long kingdom, so it has been, a long history before we got to where we got. So they took parts of Congo, and Congo took parts of Rwanda, and there's been a continuous thing. So what is happening today between Congo and Rwanda is not really new. It's like when you talk about Europe and it started today. I mean, whatever took place then was there all along. So this is the last king of Rwanda, who was exiled by Belgians because he refused to embrace Christianity. He was put in exile. And usually, I'm showing a picture here because usually a king was a king of everyone in Rwanda. He was not a king of Tutsi or Hutu or Twa. He was a king of Rwandans. And in one of the symbols of unity and whatever, usually he fed the children. All the children of the country came for milk. Milk, when you talk about it, is a sign of life. Without milk, you die in Rwanda. So that was the king giving milk to the children. The king himself was from a house of the Tutsi tribe, but once he became king, he became Rwandan. We had a very strong nationalistic, tendency before everything happened. So, and I said that length of colonialism and changes in Rwanda, really deep changes. That whole idea of looking at the whole national country started to erode. Because now the colonial power, I can give you an image here, because this is really the part of it. I wish you could see it, but as you can see, you see a colonial person measuring a nose. There were theories that Tutsis had long noses, Hutus had short ones, so people were arbitrarily put in certain groups based upon their nose or the features of their face. Here you see they are measuring the distance between here and here. So because, see, you are having people coming from Europe not really understanding what is taking place in Africa. And if you follow the history of Belgium today, not a few months ago they didn't have a government. The same problems they had in Belgium were transported to Rwanda. So that kind of division came among the people. So that kind of ethnic polarization took place, eventually being the roots of genocide. 1959, the independence came. This is when the king was being exiled in Iraq. He was put in a cave for quite some time. And, this is the independence. The Belgians said, what they call democracy is the rule of majority, numerical majority. That's how it is. So if you were in the minority, you became not part of that democratic stuff. That was the beginning since 1959. The Tutsis were completely excluded. They were blamed for the king because supposedly the king came out of the Tutsi ethnic group. And they were blamed for whatever evils society was facing, whether it was economic problems, whether it was, whatever. They blamed it on the Tutsis. They became demonized for whatever was ailing this, our country. So, the Belgians and the Hutus unified themselves. They established the first government. First president of Rwanda was a Hutu majority. This is what he said already in 1960. So when you look at genocide, really you have to go the way. The Hutu and the Tutsi are so different. He bought into the stereotypical views of 19th century. They are so different that they can't live together. We needed to talk about the Tutsi land and Hutu land, because really we are different in terms of who we are. So the whole country started to interiorize what they call the Hamitic hypothesis, that the Tutsis are foreigners. They are not even from Rwanda. They came somewhere from Tanzania. Sometimes they actually call us Jews of Africa. They say we came somewhere. I don't know where it is. We came from Ethiopia. We came from wherever. So when people were killing during genocide, they used the river because supposedly it was a quick way to go back to where it came from. That was pretty much. So, and Rogers was one of the most horrible racist person in the history of Rwanda, who was from Belgium. And he aligned himself with the Hutus. This is, he got some of the biggest monuments in the country. So you can imagine what it is. This is the second president, the one who was killed during the beginning of genocide, the one with the Mobutu of Congo. And the main reason I'm putting him here, they always say genocide started because the president was killed. The rules were there. The machetes have been purchased and stuff like that. So, and for a number of years, what they call Interahamwe, who killed people by millions, were trained since 1991. So it was an intense training, that most people knew very fast. The war started, this is the Rwanda Patriotic Front now in the country. And they are credited to have stopped the genocide. This is one of the museums in Rwanda. Not a museum, a church. It's a church. Most of the churches or schools or all over the country are part of the memorial. They've left it for people to go and see. So I'm just showing you the biggest challenges we have. number one, you have genocide. Then you have all these people coming back from Congo. The majority of them have killed people. More than 1 million people came back. Now, you can imagine what the type of justice we have in the country. And that was in 1996. We still have the orphans, widows, and traumatized survivors, and those people coming back reoccupy their place in the village or in the city. Now you have maybe one survivor in that village. So those people are coming back, they are going in front of them, and you can imagine what it means for them. Another big challenge, we have thousands and thousands of genocide suspects who have never been tried. You know, the Justice Department was not prepared for this thing. The International Tribunal that is in Arusha, Tanzania, 8 years old, the money have not tried more than 7 people. You can imagine what it means for Rwanda inside the country and how many people they can actually try. You know, we all believe, whether we come from a different perspective politically or whatever we believe, we don't have a choice, really. In Rwanda, we don't have a choice. We live in the same area, we live in the same villages, same neighborhood. So for us, ultimately, we have to reach a sense of reconciliation. There is no, unless you find another country, but that's something that people have tried to do in their own way. You know, we try. We don't necessarily like what the government does in terms of reconciliation, but that's the political approach to reconciliation. But that's what we need to do. Gacaca, if you ever see it in Rwanda, that's the customary type of justice revived during genocide. Usually gacaca in traditional Rwandan society was to try people who have stolen a cow, or people who have done something against the elders, but it was not fully equipped to try people who have killed 50 people. You know, we are not fully equipped. So they had to retrain people to try to find people who can do those things. People with integrity, it's very difficult to find. Because sometimes you choose those people, you say, okay, these people have integrity, they are coming from the 2 ethnic groups. And then you find down the road that those people maybe have people buried in their backyard. So it's very, very difficult. So justice is definitely one of the most difficult and challenging part of Rwanda today. They have to screen. This is typically how the gacaca looks like. They put people under trees, you know, big trees in Rwanda, and then they bring people who have been selected. They are the ones who are going to ask. They are trained for 6 months, and then they become the judges and the jury, obviously. You know, I'm going to go fast in this, then show a couple of scenes of genocide. This is what Rwanda politically, in the political area, they have what they call Vision 2020. Vision 2020 includes mostly promoting education. They believe that through education you can actually eradicate genocide. Because they believe people really committed the genocide because they didn't know how to make choices. Recently choices. People listen to the radio, they respect their leader, but they don't have any type of critical thinking in terms of what to choose once it comes. You know, is it enough education? That's people to judge, but you know, what I'm saying is that this is one of the biggest things, and this is the area where it developed in Rwanda. When you go to Rwanda now, there's a movie they just showed, and we're in Los Angeles at the Museum of Tolerance. They showed a movie called Rwanda Rising, and what was projecting was very rosy. Rwanda now is known as the most clean, the cleanest city or country, I mean, whatever, developing and so on and so forth. But obviously that's the surface. You know, we still have most of the challenges, especially when you talk about genocide and the issues of it. You know, they brought computers even in the primary school. Sometimes they don't have a place to put them into. You know, people are learning how to use them under the trees, actually. So they have computers. Donations from the United States. What I can tell you is that what has happened in the post-genocide Rwanda is that the international communities have been now very visible. You know, President Clinton has opened the museum of, no, the memorial in Kigali. He's the one who funded it. People like Andrew Young, people like Quincy Jones, all those people are moving to Rwanda. But obviously, once again, it's also limited in where they go. You know, we are talking about the things, and you know, they are focusing. One thing I can tell you, Rwanda is one of the, I'm not going to say it, but it's one of the most beautiful countries, and I think that the people also are beautiful. They are beautiful, and this is not a cliche. What I find as a strength is that people are really have started to go from that kind of dependency structure built by genocide, by former governments. They are helping themselves, including creating grassroots organizations like the one you go through when you go to Rwanda. You know, obviously it's also a poor country. They rely on farming and cattle raising with no commercial value. Usually when you have, the more you have and the richer you are, because it's really for display more than the commercial value of it. You know, rich culture, mostly on tourism. But the biggest problem I find is that I said that Rwanda is a militaristic country, and it is today. You know, it is still. I mean, so what is the balance in this case? So people have tried to find a way of building a bridge between the military and civilian life. You know, we don't, because the more you develop something and the more you are going to put more energy into it. If you have a very strong military, like in the case of Rwanda, obviously you have skirmishes with your neighbors, like what is happening in Congo. So they are being, you know, demilitarized through the civilian initiatives. Like what they call Muganda is one of the best things to happen to Rwanda, is when everyone goes to work every Friday. Usually for poor people, they go and they work on farms, they do the stuff, and this is what they are doing in here. Private sector is already developing, you know, you have state-of-the-art thing, but what does it say about the whole country? This is our Air Force, you know, so if you see something like that, you can laugh, but this is the first time that Rwanda had their own whatever. But people are proud of this thing. But always as a Southwest, genocide. You know, in Rwanda, the problem that we find is that even that the so-called development, when we talk about the country developing, is that the legacy of genocide is still as tough for survivors as it was 14 years ago, if not worse. Because sometimes people believe that because now Rwanda is in the news, there's money coming and so on and so forth. What happened is that the public sector has abandoned any effort to help genocide survivors. And they rely more and more on private donations like the stuff we have been helping with. So organizations that we have, grassroots organizations, are more in turn with, especially the survivors in the villages, in the city, because they are visible. They are visible. And genocide has been also, like any other place, pretty much commercialized. You know, sometimes that's what happened with it. But in the villages, unless you go there and create something, and we've found Americans who go to Rwanda, who have started the clinics, who have been volunteering, they make the biggest difference. You know, so any kind of effort from people is we still have this. These are the children. This is where we, the children of Mayaga, where the Friends of Rwanda Association has been working. Obviously, as you can see, they are young. You know, they are younger than 14 years ago. So this is another problem. The children, we started as a group, are having children. You know, so unless you are there with the military, there's also a certain exploitation of children in many different areas. And you know, this is the area I was there. Wherever you go, you are always burying people, even today. It's not done. We are still, you know, people are trying to put people in decent burials. And it gives them a peace of mind. As I said, it can be symbolic. Maybe it's just dogs. But as long as you know you have at least a family compound where you put the bones of your parents, it makes a big difference. These are the colors of genocide in Rwanda, and usually they put people in small caskets every day, mostly bones. You know, and wherever you go into the country, you find that big thing when you see it. Usually it's in Rwandan, Kinyarwanda, but it's really saying these are our people who died in 1994 genocide. So this guy had 15 people, they all died. They are buried in that church. And he says he communicates more with the dead than the people who are alive. So he got the place. He goes in and he cleans the bones, and he does it every day. He has a sense of peace just being there on himself. This is one of the children we got recently, because he was not among the initial FORA children, but he was everywhere, and he's one of the most positive person you can find, really. You know, he's always thinking in terms of what will be done in the future, and yet he doesn't have anyone. We don't even know where he came from, but he's somewhere in the country. So, SOGM is the association we go through. This is when we were starting a new school in the country. These are the volunteers. Some of them are from the United States. We were in they call one of the building Blessing Building. So it's, you know, they called it themselves Blessing for what it means for them. And wherever you go, you find the children. You know, on one hand, for us, it's the hope for the future. But what kind of society are they going to build? Unless really we reach them right now. And reaching them is volunteering, it's becoming parents, they don't have, or becoming an advocate for them. You know, whether it's advocating them for the government or helping them to reach their full potential. We are not creating people who will be dependent on the nations. It won't help anyone. You know, we are trying to promote a sense of independence and ultimately reach interdependence, where they can sustain themselves in their own communities and wherever they are. And they are happy. You know, what is amazing is that the resilience is there. They find you and they are willing to share it, especially when they know people care. You know, even if you go and make that big speech and say, you know, you have people in the United States from Sonoma who have donated this money to do this thing, for them they believe it's like they are seeing them through the lenses. We can see you when you can do any kind of change. These are the graduates of that program, and you've helped that program quite a lot, the sewing school. So these are the people who have graduated in that sewing school in Miami. So I finish with this, and I just want to show, and I'm not going to speak for the next one. You know, if you have questions, you can ask, but I want to show the other one if it's okay quickly. Thanks. Some of it is pretty similar, but the biggest problem I'm not editing PowerPoint is very difficult. So
Lights, please.
Just the images. Let me tell you, this used to be the flag of Rwanda, but we got rid of it because it represented a lot for us in terms of genocide. That's the famous hotel, Hotel Mercury. These were donated by someone from Canada. So they studied a soccer team. Yeah, so they have good clothes. They are very proud to wear it. Yeah. And I've given one of my farms for coffee, and we are trying to get the children to get some kind of sustainable development. The coffee in Rwanda is one of the best, and they have been trying to develop a plantation. These are students from Sacramento who went to Rwanda last year. And unfortunately, one of them just passed away recently. Very fast. The one on the right. These are children who organize a traditional dance group just for money. So they entertain people to get some kind of money. And these are widows. Thanks.
Thanks, please.
So thank you very much, and all I can say again is, keep doing what you're doing. Please let other people know about the genocide, wherever it is. Learn about the science that lead to genocide, and I think you might have it in your reading, and take action. I can tell you that, in my point of view, governments don't stop genocide. They don't. People do. It's when people have the audacity to push their governments or to do other things that will be able to stop genocide. Thank you very much.
Question? Yes?
The program that you started or you're talking about, is that because those Tutsi entities, or is it because you said, I'm just wondering how they're now getting along, or how, what's the progress?
We don't select the children based upon their ethnicity.
Right, so it's independent of that, that's what I'm asking.
Right, so all the children who are orphaned during the genocide, whether their parents killed them, they happen to be there, then we take them as well. And it seems to be working fine. Usually, I truly believe that when people are in a situation where people love them, show them what they are doing, they'll be fine. Yeah, it's to find ways to reach the children actually when they are young.
People on the chase still consider themselves Tutsi or
You know you are a Tutsi, you are a Hutu. One of the attempts at reconciliation by the government was to say you are not a Hutu or a Tutsi, you have to be Rwandan. They believe that would speed up reconciliation. And that's fine. As I said, there's no single model on how to reach anything, really. It seems to work for them. It seems to work for government. However, when you talk about getting out the deep roots of genocide, you can't achieve it by just ignoring who you are. Especially when someone is still wounded, and especially that most of the people don't accept what they have done. Yeah, so maybe I am like a broken record. I believe you have to have first certain collective thing first, collective memory, and accept the suffering of it. We did something, let's face it, as a nation. We don't have to look into a dichotomy between Hutu and Tutsi, and then fix it. And whatever we create will be stronger than what we had before. But you can use propaganda for anything. If I use propaganda to say, go and kill your neighbor because he's your enemy, and now you are saying, okay, you are all Rwandans. Imagine if I come back next and I'm more powerful and I say, they lied to you. You are not Rwandans. And those stuff are still there. So I believe there are prerequisites to reach true reconciliation by moving, in that direction of talking about national character as opposed to ethnic. And it doesn't really, they are not mutually exclusive. They are not. You can still recognize what happened in Rwanda because it has already started to happen with the negation of genocide in Rwanda. People say it was Rwandan genocide. It's Rwandan genocide. Who did what? People don't care. As a matter of fact, what happened was that one journalist who is local was writing and said, he didn't know who was Tutsi, who was Hutu. He said, you can imagine, for instance, when the Tutsis were hacking Hutus to death, because he doesn't know. And because people don't have really that intellectual inquiry, especially when it comes to stuff in Africa. What's an ethnic group versus the other? Really think about it. So the problem is that until people can really understand what happened and be willing to move from it, then have a true reconciliation. It's like in the family, you come and you say, okay, I really did this something nasty, but let's just forget about it. Without talking about it, it's impossible. So I think that we need that kind of small, it's like a transition before we can actually say, we are all this and that, why? There are people still killing, even today. Survivors are being killed. So how can you say that doesn't exist when it's still there? So that's the problem.
In fact, if you'll notice on your program, we went to a conference in Sacramento about Rwanda and Rwanda post-genocide. And a Rwandan pointed out to me that it wasn't the Rwandan genocide, it was the genocide of the Tutsis. And that is one of the reasons that on your flyer and our information, we talk about the Tutsi genocide, because what is happening in Rwanda is very much part of what happens with the Holocaust, where people deny that it ever happened. Yes.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
I hope you all the best. In the experiences that Rwandans have had with their genocide, are they aware of the rest of the nation, of what's happening in Darfur, Sudan, and possibly Zimbabwe?
It depends on, the people in villages, usually they are not much aware of it. But now people have television. Rwanda is pretty much involved in the Darfur, actually. It's one of the biggest forces in Darfur right now, the government. So the military of Rwanda was sent to Darfur under the African Union, right? And actually has been also one of the push from African groups that the main reason why Darfur doesn't really, the problem is not to solve, is that they insist on UN. And we've seen what UN has done in Africa so far. So they are saying if they could empower, because obviously the unity of African nations is pretty weak. It's a sum of all the countries that poor. So they are saying instead of pushing for UN to be involved in situations sometimes they don't understand, and they end up sending African troops anyway. Why not to help the Africans themselves to go and solve that problem? Because they know what they are missing. Most of the people in Darfur and the problems in Darfur are going to start problems in Chad. You know, it's happening. It's going to start problems in Somalia and so on and so forth. So people have a vested interest in stopping genocide in Darfur. And if they are given enough, you know, in that direction, I think it can be solved.
Could you speak a little bit about the responsibility of journalists in times like these? And there's a story of the radio man who was eventually tried for being complicit in genocide, the man who said, cut the trees. Could you speak a little bit about that and what you think about that?
See, for instance, in Arusha, it has been very frustrating because the media of genocide are being tried, but people are unable to decide whether it's free speech as opposed to hate. For us, it's more, maybe in a well-advanced democratic nations, you can talk about free speech. Because you have other institutions trying to mitigate what the media can bring, right? But in our countries where you rely on one media, like radio, it was as responsible, if not even more, than the people who actually took the machetes. Because these people were, you know, and understanding also the demographics of the people who were receiving what was there. So they are responsible for genocide. You know, these are the people who have been actually telling people where people were, but also when the regions had not been as affected, like in the south of the country, saying, the job is not done yet, you have to go there, you have to do this and that. So they abetted the help to genocide in that way. So obviously the media can do both, right? It can be the best thing against the genocide as much it can, especially in our country. It's an arm of propaganda. You know, people are talking about unbiased media and whatever, but it's not, obviously. And as a matter of fact, this is what is happening. They say as much as we use propaganda for killing, we can also use propaganda for bringing people together. You know, it depends on which level of propaganda you are going to reach and how you are going to use the media. But a problem that maybe you made me think of, I didn't talk about, is that, for instance, the Western media in the United States and in France and in Belgium and in other parts of the world are the people actually who are also promoting the ideas of revisionism and negationism. In Canada 2 weeks ago, there was a big speech, a big conference on people who were denying that the genocide of the Tutsis took place in Rwanda. And one is being tried in France for, we are lucky because the survivor groups push for that. He's being tried. But Payan has written a book, if you have a chance, it's called Angry Blacks, it's in French, Angry Blacks and White Liars. But he really denies the genocide. He's saying if people died, it was the same. You know, so you can't talk about the genocide of one group or that, you know, either they talk about the double genocide or they talk about genocide. You know, and what I'm saying is that what is happening in Rwanda is also abated by people outside of the United States, including policymakers. You know, there are letters, I think I shared with you last year, of one congressman in the United States who was denying genocide happened. You know, and as a matter of fact, that it was a conspiracy between the United States government and the Tutsis to have strategic control of the region by faking the genocide. So, it was all over the media, especially if you are attracting interest of certain groups, and depending upon who is going to read and who is supporting, it's very dangerous. So it will be easier for us to fight against Rwandans who are denying genocide. It's understandable. I wouldn't want to accept that my father or my mother has done what they have done. But for other people who have never set a foot in Rwanda, and to start writing about those things is very irresponsible. And for me, actually, I'm more appalled by them than even Rwandans who are doing the same.
Yes. What is the presence of the United Nations in Rwanda now? Do they have any role?
Today,
Yeah. What are they doing now?
they left.
So they're gone.
They are gone. You know, Rwanda right now is stable. And the stability is the place you can go and walk at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whereas some of the students who went there will tell you. But it's by the order is maintained by the military, obviously. It's the military. And that's once again, even for us, who don't necessarily want to see the military, but you are afraid. You say, if the military is preserving my life, so be it. You send other places in Africa where people die, when there's no such protection. And they are, you know, so it doesn't prevent survivors or other people to die, but at least it's minimal in terms of how you see that. But obviously, we are wishing for a civil society that doesn't have to rely on the military to ensure, you know, your life. You know, you have to have the military at every corner of the country, at the university before you can go in. You have to take off your shoes. It's like the airport. You know, when you go to the airport right now, you can, you know, you go to the university, if you are wearing a hat or shoes, you have to remove them and you have to be at a certain distance so they can scan you if it's your first time. So. But it's a price. It's a price sometimes for, and you know, let me tell you, during the genocide, I could have accepted another colonization and save lives. And then deal with that after, but it didn't happen. So I'm willing to take whatever it takes, even if you can save one person's life. So, yeah.
I'd like to ask you about religion. I know a lot of people fled to the churches for sanctuary, and that sanctuary was violated. What is the state of religion now? I know you mentioned that there might be a new religion that's popped up.
Right. It's in Rwanda, something that is really thriving and which is religion. Because what happened is, and it's not really during the genocide at all. The Catholic Church in Rwanda, starting with colonialism, was part of the power structure in the country. It was part of the power structure. The people in the church were more powerful than the people outside. And they had aligned themselves with the current government in Rwanda. So what happened was that even though, you know, we are talking about them being involved in the killing, you know, the place I go to teach, the bishop, because most of the people were Catholic in Rwanda, about 80-something, they went to church. Because the bishop was living in one of the most magnificent residences on top of those churches and schools. And they came because he had told them, if we reach the church before the killing, because they had started the killing in Kigali and they were moving in the inside, he said, you'll be safe. So they got there, the bishop was still there, he never visited those people in, and all these people came. They were actually putting those, how do they call it, when you call people all over the because Rwanda is here. Big, yeah, big speaker, because we are hilly, you can hear the echo, right? So you could call people like in 20 miles, because it goes and you know, some kind of reverberation. So they were calling people, if you are still hiding somewhere, you better come to church, or you better come to school immediately, because you are going to close. So if you don't come, you are not going to be safe. So when no one was coming anymore, because people were streaming, you know, coming to church and stuff, and eventually when no one was coming, that's when they threw the grenades, you know, and they had to close whatever entrance you can find. So everyone died in those. You know, one school, and you have to understand in the rural areas, usually you don't have as many people like in the cities. But in one school, 20,000 people dying because people from neighboring neighborhoods were coming over there. So the church is a part of the violence in Rwanda, and it's even when we were growing up, even before genocide, I remember that there was a time when you went for confession. If you said anything about doing something against the Tutsis, they said, no, that's a revolution. All the kids grew up understanding that's fine. If you did something against the Tutsis, it was not really a sin, per se. So we grew up mistrusting the Catholic Church, even though we were Catholic during that time. But you can imagine what happened after. Number one, people were afraid of going back to those churches, and they started the New Age type of church, born again, people creating their own churches. And now we find in Rwanda those big mega churches where people can assemble and talk about, how things are. Reconciliation, usually you bring Tutsis and they are there, they sing, and they say, we are all brothers and we forget. And in a way, people are encouraging them because they say within those new churches you can completely forget. It's like drugs. You go out there, you take drugs, and you forget about the things and what happened in Rwanda. You don't remember. And so I don't know the future of those movements. What I know is that there have been a slight decrease in people embracing Islam, because people said that the Muslims actually kept their brotherhood during the genocide. They were a very tiny section of the country, not even 1%. And then you find that the people, especially like the Methodists, who grew because of people from the United States going to Rwanda and studying those organizations, including the Mormons and Presbyterians. In Kigali now we have like 20 churches. Before we used to have one, and that was the Catholic Church. So.
Does anybody else have any questions? Will you join me in thanking them?